Just a second. There you go. Thank you. The subcommittee will come to order. I believe this is the second Veterans Administration Committee hearing that we've had in this since the renovation. I believe this is the fourth. I want to thank everybody for coming today. I want to thank our witnesses. It's great to see you. For being here today to discuss the Transition Assistance Program and the role that each department plays in helping service members take this monumental step in their lives. As you may know, I'm a former Navy SEAL who did 26 years in the military, and I have firsthand knowledge of the difficulties that can come with making the change from being an active duty service member to a veteran. Over 200,000 military personnel leave the service each year. For many service members, this can be a time when they take on new challenges and hopefully build a promising new life. For others, this year-long process is filled with uncertainty and anxiety. Having had a job, a strong community, and a sense of purpose for many years, these service members must redefine who they are, and their new purpose will be the minute they step off their base or ship. That's when that starts. If they don't have a well-thought-out plan in place, they can find themselves without the necessities of life, income, food, shelter, and it can happen very, very quickly. As we learned in our field hearing in San Diego earlier this month, there's approximately 33,000 homeless veterans in the United States, and this simply should not happen. One homeless veteran is too many, and we owe these men and women who sacrifice so much for us more than that. Especially when we think of veterans being thrown out of lodging to make room for illegal immigrants. Even though the Veterans Administration has assured us that they were not funding this program, that is still shameful on all levels. I'm committed to solving this problem and doing right by our veterans. This Transition Assistance Program is a big tool in our toolbox to help address this problem. Service members who have a job lined up after separation from the military or a clear path for their future are much less likely to experience homelessness, and service members who are aware and have already signed up for the benefits they're entitled to and understand how to access them are much less likely to end up in dire straits. Service members who have community or family support are less likely to end up in a state of mental distress and commit suicide, and that is why this is my primary legislative agenda. The current TAP program, while well-intended, is not meeting the needs of our service members. Too many of them are falling through the cracks, and we've got to do better by helping them build a concrete plan for their life after service. Oh, there you go. I ask unanimous consent to enter into the record a memo that we picked up in San Diego. It's called the R4ST. That's a Readiness for Special Operations Transition Program. This is now an MFP 11 program, which means it's fully funded and programmed through the Special Operations Command. In 2000, without objection, so ordered. In 2019, this committee worked incredibly hard to modernize the Transition Assistance Program under your leadership. Many of these proposals were thought during the hearing much like the ones we are having today. However, what Congress intended and what the Department of Defense implemented ending up being wildly different, so we're here again today with the same organizations in the room discussing an improved TAP, but also a program that is still not up to spec for our service members. While some veterans speak highly of TAP, we've heard many more veterans refer to the current TAP program as nothing more than a resume writing workshop. And while having an up-to-date resume is an important tool for finding a job, there are so many other tools that we can build into TAP to ensure the transition progress is easier. We've heard of the successful Skill Bridge program in helping transitioning service members connect with employment. We've heard of the need for more mental health counseling. We've heard of the need for more individualized training sessions, and we've heard of the need for a warm handoff for service members that are at risk of being homeless and food insecure. We need to be creating more connections like these for our service members. And we need to ensure that the transition process is started when it is legally required to ensure service members can take advantage of all the tools that are offered to them. It's my understanding that 70% of service members are not beginning this process a year in advance. Delaying the start of transition puts these service members at a distinct disadvantage. It is a disservice to those who have risked their lives for our wonderful country. Finally, we need to be building in more one-on-one counseling for transition. This should not be a check-the-box situation. It should be dedicated to helping each individual service member have the tools they need to successfully transition. We owe it to each and every one of them. I hope to hear from you today, our witnesses in the first panel, about what has improved since 2019 and what continues to need work. It's important that all agencies, as well as Congress, work together, especially on this issue. I also welcome the second panel later this afternoon and hope to hear about the improvements we can make to TAP from their perspective. As I said during my first hearing as chairman back in March, this subcommittee is not bipartisan. It is nonpartisan. And this topic reflects that more than any other topic I believe that we handle every day. I now yield to the ranking member for his opening remarks.
Thank my friend, the chairman, and thank him particularly for coming to visit our district. Recently, we had a great hearing out there. I want to thank our witnesses and our viewers, and I want to thank all the Capitol staff that worked on this beautiful hearing room that we've been waiting a while to move back into. Today, we're going to address a matter that is crucial to the well-being and success of our service members, the transition out of the military. It's my honor to advocate for the brave men and women in uniform. And today, as we hear from our federal partners and organizational leaders, I hope we can focus on two key issues that require immediate attention. First, the need for a personalized transition process and the necessity of granting our service members more time to prepare for civilian life. Each individual who serves in our armed forces has unique experiences, skills, and aspirations. Every single service member. And each individual prepares to begin a civilian life in a wholly individual and unique way. Recognizing this, we've got to strive to create a transition process that is tailored to the specific needs of each service member. Put another way, a one-size-fits-all approach simply doesn't suffice. It's crucial that we develop personalized plans that consider factors such as career goals, educational pursuits, physical health, mental health, and financial and familial obligations. The reforms made in the fiscal year 2019 National Defense Authorization Act were a great start. However, as we're going to hear today, those reforms are still not fully implemented. I recognize that COVID-19 contributed to this by forcing TAP to pivot to a lot of remote programming. However, DoD began moving away from remote TAP over a year ago. And last week, as I think we all know, the president ended the public health emergency. So as far as I'm concerned, the time for excuses is over. We've lost too much time already. Too many service members have missed the value of a full transition process. And look, if it's a matter of resources, let us know. That's why we're here. It's no secret that Congress hasn't met the Department of Labor's funding requests for TAP staffing. That is true. But does DoD need more? What about VA? It's our duty as legislators to deliver resources to accomplish our shared goal, but we can only do so if our partners make us aware of what's needed. So today we look at how we achieve full implementation of current law, but we also look forward, and we've got to look forward by discussing and working on the next improvements to TAP. That's why I've introduced the TIER Act. TIER Act expands examination of a service member's needs during the TAP process to cover things like child care requirements, spouse employment status, duty station location, service member's operating tempo, and if the service member is a Native American, the eligibility for additional benefits. With these basic fixes to help prepare service members for transition, we can significantly improve the program. It's also vital that we recognize the limited time frame currently allotted for in this critical period in a service member's life. Far too often, our brave men and women are rushed through this transition phase, resulting in unnecessary hardships and increased vulnerability. The numbers that GAO will present today are simply stunning. Too many veterans have been waived out of their two-day track, missed out on employment and education information. And look, I'm aware of the challenges that our commanders face in giving their unit members time to prepare for civilian life while balancing the vast responsibility of providing for our nation's defense. I've heard those challenges firsthand, representing Camp Pendleton, for example. That's why we've got to have a serious conversation about how service branches handle force structure. It's unacceptable for a transitioning service member to be told they're irreplaceable and therefore can't attend a TAP class. It's our duty as a grateful nation to provide our service members with the support and the time that they need to successfully transition into civilian life. So by personalizing the transition process, by guaranteeing the time, we can empower our veterans to not only reintegrate into society, but also thrive in their post-military careers, which is ultimately what we all want to see. And with that, I'll yield back to the chairman.
Thank you, Ranking Member Levin. I'll now introduce our witness panels. Our first witness is from the Department of Defense, Mr. Alex Baird, the Acting Director of Defense Support Services Center at the Department of Defense. Our next witness is Ms. Cheryl Rawls, the Executive Director of Outreach, Transition, and Economic Development at the Department of Veterans Affairs. Our third witness is Ms. Margarita Devlin, the Deputy Assistant Secretary at the Department of Labor. And our final witness for this panel is Ms. Dawn Locke, the Director of Strategic Studies at the Government Accountability Office. I would ask the witnesses to please stand and raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear to tell the truth, the testimony you are about to provide is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Thank you, and let the record reflect that the witnesses have answered in the affirmative. Please take your seats. Hey, so I'm a retired Navy SEAL Senior Chief. You're going to see a clock that's going to be in front of you. It's going to be 5 minutes, and that's exactly how long you'll be talking. I've read all of your written testimony, and it's fantastic in its entirety, but we want to keep this moving at a steady clip. Is that good? That's a deal right there. Mr. Baird, you are now recognized for 5 minutes to deliver your testimony on behalf of the Department of Defense.
Sir, I will start by telling you I was raised by a Marine, so I never go for time. Chairman Van Orten, Ranking Member Levin, and distinguished members of the subcommittee, thank you for the opportunity to appear before this oversight hearing on the Transition Assistance Program, TAP. The department is committed to supporting our warfighters and their families as they navigate the transition from military to civilian life. TAP is the essential foundation of that support and sets the conditions for successful transition. Each year, TAP provides approximately 200,000 service members with a common level of support, regardless of location, service, or component, at over 200 locations around the globe. The overarching result is that today's TAP provides service members more comprehensive transition preparation, information, support, and services than at any other time during our nation's history. TAP provides broad-ranging information, training, resources, and support that effectively prepare service members for success as they navigate through the challenges and opportunities presented during the transition from active duty to civilian life. This support enables and empowers service members to leverage their skills, knowledge, and abilities to reach their full potential, achieve individual post-transition goals, and to continue serving our nation as successful veterans who strengthen their communities. Since its inception in 1991, TAP has undergone sweeping changes. These changes have ensured that TAP is relevant, progressive, and ever improving to meet the needs of transitioning service members. The flexibility afforded by the current TAP design allows tailoring of the transition process to individual needs and goals while ensuring that service members receive information and resources that best support individualized preparation for transition. The relevance of TAP, focused on the preparation for civilian life, ensures service member buy-in and active participation in TAP. In short, TAP works. TAP works in large part because of the TAP Interagency Dynamic Partnership, a best-in-class example of effective federal agency collaboration and service delivery. The TAP Interagency delivers TAP as an individualized, robust program with alternative pathways and multiple levels of assistance. Each step of the process is guided by a TAP counselors trained in providing service members with allowing them to be in control of their transition and to utilize program resources and information that best fit their needs and align with their post-transition goals. TAP is and must remain adaptive while ensuring programmatic focus on two fundamental and complementary tenets: effective counseling and service member buy-in. Correspondingly, TAP will sustain emphasis on individualized approach that best meets the service member's post-transition goals. To that end, TAP will remain innovative, responsive, transparent, and collaborative. The department, working with the service members, military services, interagency partners, non-governmental entities, and Congress, will continuously improve transition service and support. Together, we will build upon current successes and achieve our ever-improving outcomes for all TAP-eligible service members from all components. We'll achieve this by providing agile, adaptive, and individualized support and services while addressing barriers that prevent successful transition to civilian life. In closing, Mr. Chairman, I thank you and the ranking member and the members of the subcommittee for your outstanding and continuing support of the men and women who proudly wear the uniform in defense of our great nation.
Right. Well done, sir. Thank you, Mr. Baird. The written statement of Mr. Baird will be entered into the hearing record. Ms. Rawls, you are now recognized for 5 minutes to deliver your testimony.
Thank you very much. Chairman Van Orden, Ranking Member Levin, and the distinguished members of the subcommittee, I appreciate the opportunity to appear before you today to discuss the support the Department of Veterans Affairs provides to service members as they prepare to enter civilian life and beyond. I want to express my appreciation for your continued support of VA's mission to care for those who have served in our nation's military and for their families, caregivers, and survivors. Support for transitioning service members is an interagency effort between Department of Defense, Department of Labor, the Small Business Administration, and other agencies. In 2019, the interagency partners approved the Military to Civilian Ready Pathway, a 6-step framework encompassing holistic programs and services provided by federal interagency partners, veteran service organizations, VA state directors, and local community resources. Also, in 2019, the John S. McCain National Defense Authorization Act required service members to begin the Transition Assistance Program no later than 365 days prior to separation and as soon as possible in the 24 months prior to retirement. The VA One-Day Benefits and Services course is provided during TAP and orients the 200,000 transitioning service members annually to all VA benefits and services. Additionally, VA provides military life cycle modules and opportunities to meet individually with benefits advisors. Through human-centered design and survey results, we identified additional special emphasis areas for future military life cycle modules, including LGBTQ+, minority, rural, military sexual trauma, National Guard, and Reserve component. VA continues to offer the Women's Health Transition Training course, which is an online course that emphasizes women veterans' specific needs. VA acknowledges the first year of transition out of the military may pose significant challenges. It is with this thought in mind that VA created the VA Solid Start program that connects with recently separated veterans at 3 critical points after transitioning: 90, 180, and 365 days during the first year. In fiscal year 2022, VA Solid Start successfully connected with over 175,000 recently separated veterans. VA frequently assesses the need for changes and opportunities for growth. We use stakeholder engagements like the VA Transition Forum and the Military to Civilian Transition Summit to bring VA, public and private stakeholders together to learn more about transition programs and ways to better coordinate transition services while strengthening community relationships. In fiscal year 2022, VA partnered with the DoD and DOL in a human-centered design project designed to better understand the experiential needs and desires of transitioning service members, recently separated veterans, and their families for navigating military transition. The results of this research are and will be used to enhance transition. There is a need for increased collaboration with veteran service organizations and state departments, better data sharing opportunities, and increased spousal and family engagement. VA continues working towards making improvements in these areas by removing barriers and developing communication tools for spouses. In conclusion, legislation has enabled VA and our interagency partners to become a robust transition program with alternate pathways and multiple levels of assistance, allowing service members to utilize the program's resources and information that fits their needs aligned with their post-transition goals. However, VA recognizes the need for continuous improvement and remains dedicated to strengthening military to civilian transition outcomes. Chairman Van Orden, Ranking Member Levin, this concludes my testimony. and I'm happy to respond to any questions you or the subcommittee may have.
Thank you, Ms. Rawls. Oh, yes, Ms. Rawls' testimony will be entered into the record. Ms. Devlin, you are now recognized for 5 minutes.
Chairman Van Orden, Ranking Member Levin, thank you for this opportunity to testify about the Transition Assistance Program and what DOL Vets is doing to transform and modernize it. I've spent my entire federal career working with veterans and serving veterans. This is my passion, so I'm really happy to be here. VET's mission is to prepare America's veterans, service members, and military spouses for meaningful careers, provide them with employment resources, protect their employment rights, and promote their employment opportunities. VETS administers employment programs through the Transition Assistance Program. I'd like to highlight 5 areas that I think will be of interest to this committee, to the subcommittee. First, service members are attending TAP employment workshops in record-breaking numbers. VETS administers 3 core TAP employment workshops: the 1-day Employment Fundamentals of Career Transition, the 2-day DOL Employment Workshop, and the 2-day Career and Credential Exploration Workshop. In fiscal year 2022, we provided instruction to over 266,000 participants, which is over a 40% increase from the previous workshop record in fiscal year 2021. And our participant survey results are encouraging. In fiscal year 2023, 97% of participants indicated they would use what they learned in their own transition planning, and 95% reported that their confidence in transition planning was enhanced. Second topic, VETS is leading the way to transform the TAP employment space. In response to consistent feedback that service members want more personalized support beyond the classroom environment, VETS created the Employment Navigator and Partnership Pilot, or ENPP. Since its original launch at 13 military installations, ENPP has served over 10,000 participants. Our contract employment navigators provide personalized one-on-one assistance with resumes, career direction, and referrals to vetted partner organizations and American Job Centers. As of March 31st, 2023, 96% of ENPP survey respondents reported positive feelings after meeting with their employment navigator and would recommend ENPP to a colleague. And additionally, 98% felt ENPP partners met or exceeded their employment-related expectations. And I want to share just one quote from a participant. He said, "The value of the Employment Navigator is having a one-on-one conversation to go back over the plethora of information you received in TAP classes and give guidance and recommendations specific to your situation." Third topic, VETS asks Congress to consider expanding the off-base transition training pilot. Currently, veterans and their spouses are eligible to receive support modeled after our TAP curriculum at locations other than active military installations in areas with high veteran unemployment. Congress may wish to consider expanding OBTT eligibility to current serving members of the Guard and Reserve, regardless of their veteran status and their spouses. Fourth topic, VETS will leverage data to improve TAP outcomes. Traditionally, VETS has only had access to data about TAP workshops and those workshop participants. However, new initiatives such as the Employment Navigator Partnership Pilot have enabled VETS to access employment outcome information on our transitioning service members through the National Directory of New Hires at the Department of Health and Human Services. DOL is leveraging this information to improve program delivery and employment outcomes. And we look forward to sharing this information and these outcomes when it's available. And fifth, we ask that Congress appropriate the full amount requested in the President's fiscal year 2024 budget for VETS. We appreciate the funding increases appropriated by Congress for TAP. However, Congress has not appropriated the full amount requested by the President's budget and needed for VETS Federal Administration and USERRA. This appropriation is the one that funds all VETS staff and enforcement activities. This reduction presents a great risk to all VETS programs, including TAP. In conclusion, our long-term strategic goal for TAP is for the nation as a whole to recognize military service as a path to a high-quality civilian career. The future of the country's all-volunteer force depends on it. We look forward to working with this committee and appreciate the support to be able to create opportunities that ensure all veterans can have a good job and opportunity for advancement. Thank you again for the opportunity to be a part of this hearing, and I welcome your questions.
Thank you, Ms. Devlin. Ms. Devlin's written statement will now be entered into the record. Ms. Locke, you're recognized for 5 minutes to deliver your testimony.
Thank you. Chairman Van Orden, Ranking Member Levin, and members of the subcommittee. I am so pleased to be here today to discuss our work on the Transition Assistance Program, or TAP. Over the next couple of years, almost 500,000 service members will transition into civilian life. These transitioning individuals are required to go through TAP to get the support they need, whether it's finding a job, going to school, or taking advantage of other resources. Today, I will be discussing our most recent work on the TAP counseling pathways. The three areas I will cover are whether the pathways have been implemented, service member participation in the pathways, and finally, how effectively TAP is working. For the first area on implementation, I am pleased to report that the pathways have been fully implemented by all DoD services. As you know, the pathways consist of one-on-one counseling, self-assessments, goal setting, placement into one of 3 tiers depending on the level of support needed, and 3 core classes followed by a 2-day tailored course. We heard generally positive feedback about these pathways and how they are now more customized versus being that one-size-fits-all approach. As for the second area related to participation, we found that more than 90% of service members went through TAP and attended the 3-day courses. Unfortunately, the story was very different for the additional 2-day courses that dive deeper into various aspects of employment and higher education. The services waived the 2-day courses requirement for 53% of service members. That's a little more than 64,000 men and women. Notably, 22% of Tier 3 service members did not attend a 2-day class as required. Now keep in mind, the Tier 3 service members are those who are most vulnerable for transition challenges, and nearly a quarter of them are not taking the 2-day class. Another important aspect of TAP participation has to do with timeliness. The law generally requires that service members start at least a year before they separate, but we found that only 25% started on time. The reason this is an issue is because service members who begin TAP late may miss opportunities such as applying for disability benefits or taking advantage of DoD's on-the-job training programs with civilian employers. It is unclear why there is low attendance for the 2-day classes or why most service members start TAP late. We were told it could be due to various factors such as medical discharges, deployments, or a lack of command support. But it's hard to be sure. While DoD and the services collect data on timeliness and 2-day class attendance, they do not use these data to get at root causes. We therefore recommended that they leverage the data they already have to determine the reasons for and how to fix the issues with attendance and timeliness. For the third area of our review on TAP effectiveness, we found that DoD and its interagency partners, such as the VA and the Department of Labor, are sponsoring a number of studies on TAP's long-term outcomes. While not yet complete, the studies aim to show whether TAP leads to favorable results, such as how quickly veterans get a job and how much they earn. I do not have to tell anyone on this subcommittee how critical it is that we now protect the individuals who have spent so many years protecting us. They must be given the time and support needed to access transition resources. DoD and the services can help do this by making better use of their data to determine deficiencies and adjust accordingly. We will also be looking for the TAP agency partners to leverage upcoming evaluation results to verify what's working and what could be improved so veterans can better transition into healthy, sustainable lives. This concludes my statement. I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Ms. Locke. The written statement of Ms. Locke will be entered into the hearing record. We'll now proceed to questionings, and I recognize myself for exactly 5 minutes. Mr. Baird, do you consider the TAP program successful?
Yes, sir, I do consider the TAP program successful.
Are you aware that in a December 2022 report, the Government Accountability Office stated that the majority, which is 70% of transitioning veteran service members, did not begin TAP at least 365 days before leaving military service?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Why has the Department of Defense failed to implement the law as mandated by Congress?
Mr. Chairman, we were in the process of implementing the law when COVID started. At that time, 95 to 98% of our courses were in brick and mortar. We had to shift to a virtual environment, as did our federal partners.
I read. Okay. What are the DoD service branches doing to ensure that installation leadership and unit commanders are held accountable to ensure the timeline of TAP is met?
Sir, each of the service has a corrective action plan for how they will get their numbers back on track. We agree with you. The most important thing is that people start at 365.
Okay. Are you aware of any other Department of Defense programs that are performing at a 25% success rate, and would you consider those successful that are?
No, sir.
Okay. Now, Ms. Locke, in your testimony, you said that generally someone is held accountable, a unit commander. Generally, they're not held accountable. That means if someone generally has, then specifically, there should be somebody who's been held accountable for this. So can you tell me how many commanders have been held accountable for their troops not attending TAP?
We did not look into data on commander accountability, but what we did hear across the services and in the installations we visited, that commanders are not being held accountable. So it was suggested to us ways that this could be improved by, for example, incorporating TAP into commander performance metrics, because we know what gets measured is what gets done. We have also been given the idea to incorporate TAP into DoD's mission, because as we all know, there's zero room for failure when it comes to the mission, and if TAP were part of that mission, it might be given a higher priority.
I strongly recommend that you do that, because no one's gonna get to, you can only get to functional 365. There's gonna be something that comes up, rapid deployment, but these service members in the Department of Defense will not take this program seriously until commanders are held accountable, which means them not getting promoted. That's the only thing that this is going to happen. And this model that we gave from Naval Special Warfare, they actually start 2 years out. It's a 24-year cycle because they understand 1 year is not enough time because stuff comes up, and it's a fantastic model. We'll make sure you get that. And Ms. Baird, you said that 22%, that's like 11,000 service members who are placed in the Tier 3 require the maximum transition assistance. They did not attend this class, is that correct?
Was that for me?
Yes, I'm sorry.
Okay, that's correct. So 11,000 in that Tier 3 category. And again, those Tier 3 service members are those who are most vulnerable to housing insecurity and food insecurity,
okay,
or other things like that. And they're not attending the course as required.
And then, Mr. Baird, as a representative of the Department of Defense, can you explain to me why the service members in the greatest danger of becoming homeless and starving to death are being granted waivers by their commanders?
Sir, I cannot answer for each of the commanders. What I can tell you is that it is a commander's program. It is a service secretary program. During COVID, we put the priority on operating in a virtual environment. In March of 22, we put the emphasis back on the NDA 19, making sure we implemented all the components of NDA 19, and we're putting the emphasis back on the services. We report that information back up through the JEC structure, the Joint Executive Council. We will also have that information to you this fall in our report to Congress.
So, Mr. Baird, with that information that you give back to Congress, the number of Tier 3 folks that are not meeting this two-day thing, I want a list of the commanding officers' names and their command sergeant majors or command master chiefs or command chiefs. I want their names, because this has got to stop. So someone's being lazy and not running a person through this program. They need to be held directly accountable. And the last thing is this. Would you be opposed to having the Veterans Administration become the lead agency for the Transition Assistance Program? The lead. It's a huge convoluted chain of command, but I would posit that this program and our service members would be better served if, in fact, the Veterans Administration was the lead agency. Would you support that?
Mr. Chairman, the three of us work as a team. I don't know that it makes any difference who you make lead.
My time has expired. I now recognize Ranking Member Levin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Baird, it was nice meeting you in my office recently. I want to thank you for joining us today. We don't often have DOD testify before us, so I've got some questions for you. DOD's mission statement is to provide the military forces needed to deter war and ensure our nation's security. How does service member transition fall into that mission?
Ranking Member Levin, it's a key component of the entire military service process. It's key to recruitment and retention in that my service was based on my father's experience in the United States Marine Corps. My daughter's experience was based on my time in the Air Force. She's now first lieutenant in the Air Force. And so it's inherent that the Department of Defense has got to make a smooth transition so that those people continue to recruit for us.
So VA's mission is to fulfill President Lincoln's promise to care for those who have served in our nation's military and for their families, caregivers, and survivors. Would you say that VA's mission more adequately encompasses a service member's transition?
I think it's a partnership between the Department of Defense and the Department of Veterans.
I understand that, but of the two mission statements, which do you think better encompasses transition?
The veterans, sir.
Thank you for that. As we talked about when we met with Undersecretary Cisneros as well, and as I said in my opening remarks, I was frankly stunned to hear some of the numbers from GAO, and these have been repeated, but 25% of service members in the highest risk level that didn't attend the mandatory two-day class, 70% of service members didn't start TAP at least 1 year before separation. So my question for you is, to what extent, if at all, does TAP participation affect commanders' performance ratings and promotion potential?
Mr. Ranking Member, that's part of each of the services corrective action plan. How are they going to make this a commander's program and hold commanders responsible?
So what is the consequence for a commander that doesn't ensure service members under the command start TAP on time, or that all Tier 3 service members take the two-day class?
Sir, I can take that for the record, but I can't speak for the services.
So it's fair to say it's all over the place. Some may have consequences, some may not. Is that a fair statement?
Again, Mr. Ranking Member, I can't speak for the services and how they would answer that.
Okay. Well, some of them might say there are consequences, some of them might say there aren't, correct?
Correct.
Correct. So, Ms. Locke, I'll turn to you. The goal of TAP is to ensure service members transitioning from active duty are prepared for their next step in life. Do you know whether the program's effective?
You know what, we don't. And that is because we don't have the outcome data. There is a lot of output data on participation. We're collecting surveys and that are telling us that, for example, service members think the 3-day courses are useful or that they think the 2-day courses are helpful, but we don't have actual outcomes on the service members who have gone through TAP and how they're now living as veterans. What is encouraging is that these partners have interagency agreements to share data with, for example, the Census Bureau or the IRS, or as Mrs. Levin said, the Health and Human Services new hire data. So hopefully, eventually, those data will be able to show us that a TAP graduate was able to get a job, keep a job, how much they earned, and whether they had to collect unemployment. But right now, we just do not have those data.
So just to be clear, we have no data to understand the effectiveness of TAP.
That is correct.
That's something we all need to work on together. Let me turn back to you, Mr. Barrett. I have a minute here. How does the existing TAP structure work for Guard and Reserve members?
For Guard and Reserve members, it works exactly like it does for active duty. One of the things we did is we incorporated a work group as part of the TAP governance structure that is a Guard and Reserve working group, so they can elevate their members. Additionally, we have members at each level of the SSG and the TAP EC from the Guard and Reserve.
But you think it's working effectively?
I think it could work better. It's a difficult thing. Having spent many years working for the National Guard, if they deploy for 180 days, they're already behind the power curve the day they arrive at their deployed location. So one of the things we want to continue to look at is how can we best integrate both the Transition Assistance Program and the Yellow Ribbon Reintegration Program to be effective.
I appreciate that. And, I just want to say, make no mistake, we are truly grateful for the work that you do for our veterans, our transitioning service members. Doesn't mean we can't improve. So we all want to hopefully work together. We might be a little biased here on HVAC, thinking that this fits more within the VA wheelhouse. But we need the support of the DoD. We need the support of the chain of command. Make sure that this is a top priority, and we need some accountability and transparency on how the results are whether this is working or not. And I suspect we know what the outcome of such analysis would be, but the sooner we get to the bottom of it, the better. So with that, I'll yield back.
Thank you, Ranking Member Levin. I now recognize Mr. Subcommittee for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank you again all to all the witnesses for coming here to testify. I am proud to represent Davis-Monthan Air Force Base, which is in Tucson, and Fort Huachuca in Sierra Vista, both in Arizona's 6th district, my district. Between both installations, thousands of service members can call Southeast Arizona home, and ensuring that they are successful after their service in the country is a huge priority for me. So my questions are going to be in that line here for both them and their spouses. So my first one would be to you, Mr. Burt. The service members leaving the military are required to participate in the Transition Assistance Program, or TAP, which includes a combination of pre-separation counseling and 5 days of classroom, and which is classroom-based instruction. However, the Department of Defense has interpreted the 5-day TAP course differently, and each military branch and military base commander has the authority to waive the optional 2-day class. Do you think that 3 days is enough for a service member to take in all the information needed to prepare for civilian life? I know that we went through a 2-week orientation here, and there was a lot more to cover and a lot of information that is thrown our way in any kind of orientation. I can just imagine the amount of information that our service members would need before hitting civilian life, and 3 days with the option of waiving 2. What do you think about that?
That's a great question, Representative. In my case, 3 days was enough. I was 24 years in the United States Air Force. I had a job before I started terminal leave. But the Marine Corps has chosen that everyone who is a first-termer will be a Category 3, will be a Tier 3, because they need more information. The key is we've got to get to 365 days so that I've got a full year to address any of the issues I have for my transition.
So you've found, what is the feedback from the service members saying back? Because what I'm hearing is that it's not enough. Perhaps in your case, it sounds like it was, and that worked out. For a lot of the members that I'm talking to, it just doesn't seem to be enough for what they can recall is not only the days, but is the amount of information. So how do you think Congress can improve TAP to ensure the positive outcomes on the transitioning of service members? I'm hearing here from my colleagues as well, there's always room for improvement. Might have worked for you, it may work for others like you, but it doesn't work for a lot of people out there as well. So what are the opportunities here for growth and improvement?
Sir, what I would tell you is TAP today is better than it was yesterday, and TAP tomorrow will be better than it is today. It's a continuous evolving environment and a learning environment. The 2019 NDAA changed the entire program. Before that, it was just about compliance. Everybody got the same information. There are so many benefits out there for our service members as they transition that it's hard to know all the benefits. So what we've been teaching them is where to go to get the additional information. An advantage of going to a virtual environment is a service member who is now a veteran can still go back and retake.
I'm sorry to interrupt here because I only have a minute and a half left, but I understand that part, but I want to hear from you is what are improvements that you think we can still make? As good as you're describing the program, I'm sure there are ways in areas where you and I could agree that we have to improve, so please cover that.
It's where I need to improve, sir. It's where I need to get all of our commanders to 365 days. It's where I need to get the IT infrastructure in place to support the long-term data.
Thank you for that, and I only have a little over a minute, but Ms. Devlin, if I can address you with a question here quickly around spouses and the testimony you described, the transition employment assistance for military spouses or teams to help military spouses find employment when their spouses leave the military. And based on the information from the Department of Labor, military spouses have higher unemployment rates compared to national averages, and many can only find part-time work. What takeaways does the Department of Labor have from the military spouse employment curriculum, and are there any plans to scale up this program?
Thank you so much for that question. It's very important that we work with military spouses to eliminate their unemployment and eliminate the barriers that they have to continued employment through the multiple deployments with their spouses. So the TEAMS program has been popular, but it's new and it's just, people are just gaining awareness. We also have services for military spouses at our American Job Centers through the American Job Center Network. So what we're learning is that we need to get to them early enough. We need to give them the information and the resources so that they don't have gaps in employment with each change in duty station.
Thank you so much. Mr. Chair, I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Subcommittee. I now recognize my friend, Ms. Ramirez, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, friend Chairman Van Orden and Ranking Member Levin, for today's hearing. I additionally want to thank all of you who are here today as our witnesses, Ms. Rawls, Mr. Baird, Ms. Devlin, and Ms. Locke, for coming before the committee to engage in what is a critical discussion about service member transition and how the Transition Assistance Program is an essential tool to empower veterans to make the most informed decisions regarding their post-service life. And when we talk about service member transition into veteran life, we tend to focus primarily on education and employment, with good reason, but that's not the whole picture. As some of you have heard me speak before, I spent many years running a social service agency in Chicago, and I cannot emphasize enough how important wraparound services are. So, Mr. Baird, to what extent does TAP make service members aware of other resources beyond employment and education? For example, how does TAP help with mental health or food or housing assistance that might further support service members during their transition?
Thank you for that question. TAP was designed to prepare the service member for transition. We do avail them of opportunities of where to get additional information. The Department of Veterans Affairs does that quite nicely. But we don't address those social needs after they're out of the service. That's difficult for us because we don't have that control. So the best we can do is teach people what's available so they can go post-service when they're a veteran, they can go out and seek those opportunities out.
So I know that in testimony, one of you talked about how they are supposed to go through this 2-day orientation of services within that year before they are returning, but about 70% of them do not participate a year prior. So usually, if there's housing issues when they're going to be coming back, or there's other resources they need, that period of time would help. Why do you think so many are not participating within the year from prior for them transitioning back to civilian life?
I think part of it was during the COVID period, commanders were not pushing as hard, and that's got to change. There are many reasons why somebody would be given a waiver. If I've already enrolled in education, if I'm enrolled at a university, I don't need to go through the education track because I already know how to do that. If I already have a job, I don't need to go through the employment track because I've already got employment.
Got it. So let me go back. I've been talking a lot about housing, and certainly I also feel like it's important to highlight our women veterans. Women veterans have specific health needs, including reproductive health care needs. And I understand that the Department of Veteran Affairs currently offers women's health transition training to help support our women veterans transition. Ms. Rawls, as you know, less than half of eligible women veterans are enrolled in VA health care. We also know that women veterans face a higher rate of some health-related challenges after military service compared to men. That includes chronic pain, depression, and the list goes on. How can the Women's Health Transition Training Program be improved to reach more women veterans and increase VA healthcare enrollment?
Thank you very much for that question, ma'am. One of the things that can help improve this offering is for us to be able to have it virtually instructor-led so the women have an opportunity to engage. I want to make it very clear that the information that is provided in the Women's Health Transition Training, all of the information is provided in the VA one-day services. The big distinction between the Women's Health Transition Training is that it provides that forum to connect to services that VA offers, particularly for women. So by me asking to have an opportunity to have it instructor-led virtually, I think that is going to have an effect on women to be able to talk about what is happening instead of just viewing the information again.
Thank you. Chairman, I yield back.
Thank you, Ms. Ramirez. And I recognize my friend, Mr. Crane from Arizona, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I always appreciate that. I
Juan's egging me on over here. He wants me to say something nasty to you. I don't know what it is about this place. Thank you guys for being here. This is something that's near and dear to me as a veteran myself. Watching many friends of mine struggle getting out of the service. I went through TAP class, and I also volunteered a good amount of my time and resources to help other members transition out of the military. I have a couple questions for you guys. I wanted to know if when you're doing TAP class, Mr. Baird, you guys bring in experts in or representatives in some of the trades and other industries that veterans might be able to pipeline into, like construction, IT, entrepreneurship, banking, law enforcement, tech, et cetera, so that they might be able to actually get connected with somebody in a field, a national field, that might actually help them place in a job?
Congressman, we do not. There is the ability through the SkillBridge program for them to make that connection.
Through the what program?
SkillBridge.
Are they informed about that during TAP?
Yes, sir.
Great. Thank you, sir. One of the other things that I wanted to mention and see if this is a part of the curriculum at all, often successful transitions aren't just about finding a job, income, housing, etc., but a lot of veterans don't even realize how hardwired they are for service. Is there any information put out to these individuals going through TAP to how they can get plugged in and serve in their community, in their state, and possibly at higher levels?
Mr. Representative, it happens both through the DOD part and also through our partners. We emphasize the important skills that they bring. And that's one of the reasons we just met with Bank of America a couple weeks ago. 100% of the people who do SkillBridge with them, they hire. And so what we're finding is if we can make that connection between corporate America and our veterans, then they get hired.
Okay, well then let me just make a suggestion, because this is one of the biggest things that I see. One of the biggest reasons I see veterans fail is because after a certain point in time, maybe 6 months, a year, they eventually land the job and they can pay the bills. But like I said, a lot of veterans are hardwired for service and they don't even know it, which is why they actually went into the military to begin with. And once that mission is missing from their life, they feel lost. And so just a suggestion, that might be something you guys take a look at, is helping them not only understand that, but possibly getting plugged into mission-based, type things when they get out might be helpful. The next question I have is for Mrs. Dawn Locke. Why are so few service members starting TAP on time? What are some of the consequences to service members of starting TAP later than required by law?
Sure. So we have been told that the reason why people are starting TAP so late is because there's mission need. They could be on deployment. They could be hospitalized. Or again, we heard that there might be a lack of command support. And the reason why it's important to be timely with TAP is so that the service members can take advantage of the resources that are provided to them. So for example, they would have the time to take advantage of SkillBridge. But SkillBridge is a 6-month-long program, and to apply and to interview, it takes time. For those service members that are starting TAP too late, they miss out on that opportunity. In addition, what we heard from a number of service members is that the VA benefits is a very complicated process, and it's a lot being thrown at them. So they need time to research their benefits and to apply. And it's helpful if they apply and get approved while they're still in the service, because they are able to be directly connected to those resources. In addition to that, if they are approved while they're in the service, that means they immediately start collecting those benefits once they leave the service.
Thank you. Mr. Baird, in 2019, NDAA, Congress mandated that TAP would consist of a 5-day class to give service members more time to disseminate information. However, Congress has since learned that the service branches have waived attendance. Why has DOD decided not to implement law mandated by Congress, and what could a service member miss during those extra 2 days?
Representative, we believe the law gave us the flexibility to tailor TAP to each individual. There are some people who do not need to go through all 5 days. As I described myself, before I separated from the service, I had a job.
Gentleman's time has expired. And I recognize the distinguished gentleman from Indiana, Mr. Mervan.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm going to do everything I can to be introduced as your friend going forward. So if you want to meet for a cup of coffee afterwards.
I now recognize my friend, Mr. Mervan from Indiana.
Sweet. Get to the point. Mr. Beard, my question is, and Ms. Locke had a phenomenal point that I think needs to be emphasized. If you cut short the time of the 365 days and the Skill Bridge program takes time in order to ramp up, then in essence you are eliminating a program that is successful. And now we know statistically less veterans are able to participate in that because of awareness and because of the ramp of time of which they are doing that. I guess my direct question is, when it comes to veteran benefits, I have a specific case at my office right now, and I'm going to just go through the scenario very quickly. Veteran was leaving, didn't know that if he didn't transfer his GI Bill for the education component to his daughter, he couldn't do that unless he re-enlisted or did 4 additional years or the additional service that he did. He gets out, he tries giving it to his daughter, he calls my office and said, I was not aware of that. Now, generally he should be, but the fact of the matter is if he didn't participate in that program because of command not telling him that he had to go, then he is unaware of it. And that's a benefit that he's out of that he was depending on. And so what I'm trying to say is there are real people and veterans on the other end of that you know of. Can you explain, if you had a magic wand, what would you do in order for the veterans, besides the command, what other steps would you take so that the veterans themselves are aware and they know what they're missing?
That's a great question. We're very fortunate right now that our Undersecretary for Personnel and Readiness is an advocate of the TAP process. And he's vowed to help us push those commanders to make sure that they're hitting that 365 so that people have enough time. We're going to continue to leverage the online services available to make TAP open to not just the service member, but also to their spouses.
Okay. So then, thank you. Ms. Delvin, how is the Department of Labor engaging with employers and industry representatives to create more employment opportunities specifically targeted at transitioning service members?
Thank you so much for that question. Several different ways. We have a Hire Veterans Medallion program, which recognizes employers who hire veterans. There's strict criteria for it, and it's the only federal government program that recognizes employers for hiring veterans and retaining them.
What does that mean, they're recognized?
Correct. They can apply to be recognized. We verify based on the statistics of their organization, and if they meet the requirements for hiring and retention and development of veterans, they can get this recognition as a Hire Veterans Medallion Program awardee. And then in the TAP program, when transitioning service members are learning about their employment options, we tell them about this. There was actually one example in TAP class where we had a service member leave the TAP class and go contact one of the employers in the Hire Vets Medallion Program and actually got a job after separation. So that's one way in which we market to employers that, hey, it's not only great that you hire veterans, but you need to get the message out that you're hiring veterans so that transitioning service members will know to come find you and come work for you.
And for my own education, where does Skill Bridge fall under? Who's in charge of Skill Bridge?
Department of Defense.
So I guess I have a minute 28. If you're in charge of a program but not getting people enough time, do you see how the frustration we all have that we put these forward? Corporations are saying we want to participate. Of the individuals that participate, your own words said 100%. So 100% go into that program, get jobs. So the ones that are missing are the ones that are missing that opportunity. So I'm asking you to go back and to keep that in mind when you are advocating for the veterans on how important it is, because we have a program that people are unaware of that has 100% placement.
If I can, Representative, overall the program has 70% placement. It was Bank of America that's 100%.
Okay.
So I just want to make sure I don't...
70%?
But I'm excited to say that as of 1 May, the program now belongs to us. It was in a separate department within P&R, Personnel and Readiness, and so it wasn't fully incorporated into the TAP process. We believe bringing it into the TAP process will allow us to use that to leverage commanders to get people in earlier so they can take advantage of the skill bridge.
Thank you. With that, I yield back my time.
Thank you, Mr. Mervan. Now I recognize my distinguished colleague and great friend, Mr. McGarvey,
from Kentucky.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate that. I'll take my 5 minutes. Appreciate you all being here today and obviously talking about how we can help our veterans. That is the purpose of this committee, is how can we better help our veterans honestly get what they have earned and what they deserve from this panel. I was a little troubled by the answers to the questions that Mr. Levin was asking earlier, and certainly look for follow-up from that. But do want to continue to talk about TAP and its importance. And as you all know, there's all kinds of challenges veterans face when transitioning out of the service and coming into being civilians. And that TAP is a big part of helping veterans be able to succeed. Nearly 2/3 of our student veterans are first-generation college students, so not only are they facing a transition out of the military, they're facing a potential transition with TAP into a world that they don't know. And certainly, we should be there to help them and their families. We must do more for first-generation college students across the board, but particularly our veterans. So in light of all the testimony today, just thinking about this, what actions do you recommend Congress take to improve TAP and transition as a whole to better support service members in attaining higher education?
Thank you for that question. We believe we have all the tools right now that were given to us in the NDA 2019. Now it's our responsibility to continue and to implement them and use them.
So if you have all the tools you need, what's the problem?
The problem was coming out of a COVID environment where the services had different priorities, to be bluntly honest. Now the priority's got to be back on taking care of our service members as they transition.
So how do you plan to do that?
We plan to do that through our TAP corporate structure. We have services at every level of that, and we're holding them accountable. This committee's holding them accountable because they know we've got a report due that will come over to Congress in fall. So we will continue to use the structure we have to put the pressure on the services. They get very competitive as one starts achieving numbers that somebody else hasn't.
Yeah, and again, to what Mr. Levin was discussing, we certainly want to see that report. We want to get this data back. We want to make sure if you do have all the tools that you need, these programs are in fact working, and that they are working for our veterans to give them, again, what they've earned, what they deserve, what they need to continue to find success. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I will yield back the rest of my time.
Thank you very much, Mr. McGarvey. Before we close out here, I just want to follow up on one thing. When I asked you if you would be opposed, Mr. Baird, of the Department of Veterans Affairs taking lead on this issue for transition, the reason I asked that is because you have to have a captain of a ship. And when you work collaboratively, what you do, and I've looked at this, I'd love to see a line and block chart of how this is organized because it appears to be a mess. And there needs to be a desk where the buck can stop, as President Truman would say. So I want to talk to you again after this. I understood that you went and saw Mr. Levin. I appreciate that. I'd like to meet you personally in my office to talk about making sure we understand that there's a single point of contact. So if anybody has any issues, that they know who to go to, not a board. We govern by consensus, and I wouldn't use the word nimble describing Congress. So with that, thank you all very much for coming. I appreciate your time very much, and the witnesses are now excused. I hope you stick around and listen to the next panel. It'd be awesome. Thank you. We'll take a short recess. Well, thank you all for coming. Mr. Prado, if you could have a seat, please. Our second panel we'll be hearing from today, Ms. Brittany Diamond, the Associate Director of National Security and Foreign Affairs Directorate from the Veterans of Foreign Wars. I left my hat in my office. Mr. Michael Quinn, Chief Executive Officer of Higher Military and Tenova LLC. Dr. Abby Kinch, say it again? Kinch, PhD, Chief of Staff of Student Veterans of America. We've had you guys over a few times. Mr. Jim Lorraine, the President and CEO of America's Warrior Partnership, and Mr. Hernan Y. Prado, the founder and CEO of Workshops for Warriors. I'd like to welcome you all here to our second panel, and I'd ask you to please stand and raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear that the testimony you're about to provide is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Thank you. Let the record reflect all witnesses have answered in the affirmative. Ms. Diamond, you guys will see this. I don't know if you're all here earlier, but we'll be talking for exactly 5 minutes. And Ms. Diamond, you are recognized for 5 minutes.
Chairman Van Orden, Ranking Member Levin, and members of the subcommittee, on behalf of the men and women of the VFW, thank you for the opportunity to provide our remarks on this vital topic. The critical nature of military transition cannot be understated. For many transitioning service members, the change from military to civilian life represents a complete personal and professional shift not previously experienced as adults. Additionally, leaving service is often complicated by service-related ailments, family needs, loss of identity and support networks, and the need for retraining to enter a new career field. Sadly, the initial year following discharge also comes with increased suicide risk among new veterans, bolstering the need to ensure all transition stakeholders work to get it right. Some of the best resources service members have during transition are accredited representatives, like those in the VFW's Benefits Delivery at Discharge program, also known as BDD. Through BDD, individuals can file expedited VA claims and complete medical evaluations before leaving service, enabling VA to provide disability ratings upon or shortly after discharge. Receiving expedited claims decisions means BDD participants are better able to minimize gaps in essential care like mental health counseling and medication management, and use resources like the VA's Veteran Readiness and Employment Program. For these reasons, the VFW believes there's untold value in incorporating accredited representatives into the TAP curriculum. Specifically, we would like to see these individuals facilitate complementary course materials that cover VA benefits and services where practical, with an emphasis toward those that can be applied for prior to discharge. Accredited representatives would not only be able to highlight the BDD program, but also help transitioning service members file claims to aid in the seamless delivery of care and benefits once they return to civilian life. Claims assistance is a task that VA contract employees who largely teach the VA curriculum legally cannot do. Currently, however, representatives like the VFW's BDD employees experience wide variability in how, if at all, they can engage TAP participants. This is because no statute or policy exists that requires installation commanders and site managers to permit their entry into and participation in any element of the course. As a result, site managers vary in their willingness to allow representatives in TAP, and if entry is permitted, managers also differ in how they will allow them to interact with attendees. While not the rule, TAP managers often do not see the value in having accredited representatives present, or they assert that there simply is not enough time to allow them to speak to service members. We have even been told that we can better help from outside of TAP, which is completely false, especially in the context of needing to meet service members where they are. As such, the VFW believes VA must utilize representatives as tools in their TAP toolkit to the maximum practical extent. Another area of major concern is community connections. The VFW also believes it is crucial for Congress to clarify how it defines resources located in communities as outlined in Section 1142 of Title 10. Within the FY 2019 TAP reforms, Congress mandated that all transitioning service members be connected to resources in the communities in which they plan to live after service. However, DoD is not doing this consistently or effectively. As written, the requirement is too ambiguous since the statute does not articulate how resources should be identified or what it actually means to connect service members. Respondents to the VFW's BDD program survey are asked whether they received those community connections. Between September 2022 and May 2023, 1/3 of more than 1,000 respondents indicated that they either were not or did not know if they received those connections during individualized counseling. As the law requires, we would like Congress to ensure connections are being consistently made between transitioning service members and resources in the communities to which they are transitioning. One option Congress can designate for identifying connection points is the National Resource Directory. This resource contains vetted organizations that span the transition spectrum from career assistance to caregiver support. The transition program's generalist nature is not a flaw of the system, but rather a feature of the system. TAP is neither designed for nor able to address everyone's unique needs, so community resources fill the void that its curriculum cannot. In other words, the community organizations are the transition program's force multiplier, but only if connections to those organizations are effectively made. Chairman Van Orden and Ranking Member Levin, this concludes my testimony. I'm prepared to take any questions you or members of the subcommittee may have.
Thank you, Ms. Diamond. The written statement of Ms. Diamond will be entered into the hearing record. Mr. Cohen, you're now recognized for 5 minutes.
Mr. Chairman, Ranking Member, distinguished members of the subcommittee, my apologies. I'm a retired Sergeant Major. I retired November 1st, 2017, so I'm a little direct. I apologize if that offends anyone. I'm assuming it's okay with Mr. Chairman. TAP is personal to me. I was a top performer my entire career. I was promoted first almost my entire career, special mission units. I led security for the White House Communications Agency. And in my last job, I led the operations for 17,000 people in 45 countries. And I was planning on doing another 7 years. And I brought the list of assignments home to my former spouse, and she said, yeah, I'm not moving. She'd moved 7 times in 9 years, and she had finally gotten a good job and was near where she had support. So that goes into the military spouse employment piece as well. But I thought with a top secret SCI clearance, my last job, all the intel experience that I had in the DC area, it was going to be a breeze. And I went to TAP and did everything they taught me, and I went to my first job fair, and I spent 6 hours talking to 41 employers. And all 41 employers said, check our careers page and apply online, and actually broke contact with me so that I couldn't ask follow-on questions. And it was a gut punch. And luckily, a little bit of the Sergeant Major came out of me and recruiter number 40, and I said, no, look back here, how do I follow up with you? And they told me to connect with them on LinkedIn, and I did. And I will tell you that tool, that resource, it's not social media, it was a networking tool for me. It was a way to get information outside of TAP. And I dove in. I did over 200 informational interviews to figure out what I wanted to do, what I was qualified to do, and how I could make myself a best candidate, and to find the mentors that I needed to open doors for me. And, you know, when we talk about TAP, I will tell you that TAP was the hardest year of my life. Harder than Iraq, harder than Afghanistan, Bosnia, Philippines, Guantanamo Bay, because of the uncertainty at the end. Not knowing how I was going to take care of my family. And I had a retirement. So when I tell you it's personal, I mean, I lived it, and it's been my life to give back. And so what I want to say is that I acknowledge that the 4 leaders here that spoke before us are all very passionate, and they're doing their best about the program. And I know that the Interagency Council is really working hard to improve TAP, and I've seen it improve since 2017 when I got out. But somebody needs to be in charge. It's an interagency council. They default back to their own specific elements. You can't hold anybody accountable if it's not getting fixed. You can't drive innovation. I sat in on a briefing by a VA defense fellow to the VA on May 3rd, and he shared the numbers of people not attending. And the VA can't really do anything about that. So no one's in charge. So somebody has to be in charge of the program for it to be effective, for it to continue to grow. Number 2, I would say that the military life cycle transition was mandated starting back, I believe, in the VOW Act, and again in 2017, which means that service members get transition-related training throughout their entire career, not just the 1 week of training at the end when it's too much. It's been mandated by Congress. DOD's never implemented it. There's even a website, but I will tell you that the services are not providing it. If you provided training at key PCSs, at leadership schools, over the course of a career, not only will it not be the first time they see it, leaders will be able to mentor their service members and provide access to resources that they need to find their success. The third part is TAP delivery. 700 facilitators around the world reading PowerPoint for 2 to 3 days is overkill, and how much of that can you really retain? So what I'll say is that the pandemic taught us how to be remote. And I will tell you that the vast majority of our transitioning service members would love to be able to access content whenever they need it on their mobile devices with some earbuds in. There should be an LMS with all the training they want. They could take it as often as they have it, and you can track performance along the way, along with on-demand, expert-driven classes that they can get live classes on. So that's TAP delivery. And then the last part is, this is hard coming from the Army, but we've got to hold DOD accountable. It's comical that if a soldier, God forbid, doesn't get their dental checkup, it's coming down from the installation through all the command levels, and a first sergeant's marching them to the dental center, and we can't get people into TAP training. So I recommend holding them accountable using UCX, unemployed compensation for ex-service members, to track performance and fiscal repercussions. Thank you.
Sergeant Major's time has expired. I now recognize Ms. Kinch for 5 minutes.
Chairman Van Orden, Ranking Member Levin, and members of the subcommittee, thank you for inviting Student Veterans of America to submit testimony on the topic of the Transition Assistance Program. I want to talk to you today from the perspective of a former student veteran representing the post-9/11 generation of veterans currently in classrooms across the country. While there have been some attempts to improve TAP, the program is still lacking, particularly when it comes to helping transitioning service members prepare to use their education benefits as a mean to transition into civilian life. Primarily, this programmatic deficit is due to a lack of emphasis placed on the education portion of TAP, which has manifested culturally within units as well as impacted the decisions available when transitioning through higher education. First, the transition track of TAP is simply not sufficient for anyone entering higher education. Imagine a high school student sitting down with a guidance counselor to prepare for college. They often start 1, 2, sometimes 4 years out, and these visits are frequent, including a comprehensive assessment of majors, college selection, housing, financial aid, and more. TAP's Education Workshop provides service members with 2 days or online 240 minutes of counseling without individualized attention. The deficit brought by this disparity leaves service members and their families to make sometimes poor decisions that cost them time and money. Student veterans are more than twice as likely as traditional students to change their degree major because of ill-informed decisions or simple unknowns. They're also likely to incur debt, as more than half are married, more than half have children, 20% are single parents. While they are successful in the classroom, they often don't take advantage of opportunities outside of the classroom or on campus because they feel isolated by age and experience. If proper interventions started sooner and with more emphasis on education, degree major changes would be reduced, the GI Bill could be used on longer STEM degrees, and TA dollars could be more appropriately used to take courses that transfer or that are housed in the destination school. More holistically, student veterans find that isolation greatly contributed to transition stress. However, our survey feedback shows that a vast majority of student veterans felt TAP did not prepare them for these type of social and psychological struggles. Combating common feelings of isolation for student veterans with the camaraderie provided by an SVA chapter also exposes these students to the larger campus community. We've noted that student veterans who've engaged with their SVA chapter are more likely to engage with other areas of campus. Additionally, a 2016 survey found that most student veterans have some level of service-connected disability, though virtually none at the time were using disability offices or accommodations to support their academic experience. When that same study was repeated in 2022, the number of student veterans utilizing these services had increased to 26%. Not only are SVA chapters a front door to other campus organizations, but they serve as a gateway to needed campus and VA services. Most student veterans, unfortunately, don't discover their SVA chapter until late in their college career. If veteran service organizations such as SVA connected with transitioning service members during TAP or earlier, this timeline to discovering support is shortened, and we may see real impact that continues beyond immediate transition and education. Finally, the culture around the importance of TAP. There's an imbalance in the emphasis placed on transition tracks. Anecdotally and in response to surveys, some student veterans report that their unit's culture is unsupportive regarding TAP and education. Some service members do not understand the importance of the program because it's not stressed to them by their command, who themselves don't see TAP as important for transitioning service members, as was pointed to in the GAO report. The short optional track, the lack of involvement of the Department of Education in the career portion of TAP, and the minimal discussion of education opportunities post-service when compared to career opportunities demonstrates to everyone that higher education is not the intended destination for service members. Because of this, the education portion of TAP, noting that service members in large numbers are transitioning through higher education, must be improved. And not only should TAP begin earlier in the transition process, but it should be robust enough to follow a service member from the decision to separate through education and into a meaningful career. For SVA, transition services are not a bridge from one point to another, from inside the DoD to out, but through the entirety of the transition process to include all departments. Thank you, Chairman Van Orden, Ranking Member Levin, and the members of the subcommittee for this opportunity. I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Dr. Kinch. I now recognize Mr. Lorraine for 5 minutes.
Chairman Van Orden, Ranking Member Levin, and members of the subcommittee, thank you for the invitation to testify to you today. The topic of veterans employment and transition is a very important one. We all know that transition between jobs is one of the most volatile times in life, but even more so when you're involved with a change of culture. A change in routine, a change in location, the loss of camaraderie, the loss of financial security, and sometimes the loss of a sense of purpose. Together, this is repeatedly shown to lead to feelings of hopelessness, and the loss of hope is one of the largest contributing factors to veteran suicide. At America's Warrior Partnership, our mission is to partner with communities to prevent veteran suicide. Ensuring veterans have purpose and are financially stable are the ultimate issues that we are here to address today. The greatest indictment of the military is often how we treat our veterans. And the next generation's watching. When 15 to 17-year-olds see how veterans are struggling with transition and jobs after service, many quickly choose not to join the military. At AWP, we found that most companies did not know how to utilize or help veterans and their families who were already in the workforce. In response, AWP began the Corporate Veteran Initiative, which is powered by our AWP network consisting of thousands of partners. Most of them are communities. CVI raises morale and productivity of the veterans and helps employee retention and recruitment. It's a win-win. Companies such as Wells Fargo, UBS, and Peraton, to name a few, have made the choice to act. For those in transition, underemployment and financial insecurity are major issues. Programs led in coordination by the Department of Defense, VA, and DOL have made significant progress in helping veterans navigate this transition better, but they have a long way to go. However, most of this process is DoD heavy. Yet the VA and DOL will be with these former service members from discharge on. DOL and the VA must play a bigger role. When everyone's in charge, no one's in charge. The DOL and Veterans Employment, the DOL's Veterans Employment Service, DOL Vets, has a program called Employee Navigator Partnership Pilot, or ENPP. Utilizing those utilizing the ENPP, those can look to job markets, research geographic regions, craft resumes and other pre-career functions in partnership with major employers and VSOs to assist. Importantly, ENPP is open to spouses. ENPP must be expanded and given additional funding to add more to the communities. I think my colleague with the VFW said it best. Well, the GI Bill is well known. The VA apprenticeship program is not. With such a high potential for the apprenticeship program, it needs to be updated and reformed. First, the VA apprenticeship program needs to be updated to a cost of living paid to the students. Currently, it's a percentage of what's paid for using the GI Bill. That needs to end. There should be parity. Second, this program is not in any way, should not in any way use their GI Bill benefits. The company shouldn't, or risk them losing their GI Bill. Next, more needs to be done to ensure the costs of apprenticeships do not fall on the employers, including costs of certifications and licensures. We must make it easier for employers to find partners who are participating students. And finally, I'm here to applaud the SkillBridge program and offer some recommendations. SkillBridge needs to be consistent across the Department of Defense, available everywhere, and more companies need to know how this program works and can provide no-cost opportunities to transition service members without excessive bureaucracy. I suggest SkillBridge program moves to the Department of Labor for a full execution and integration into the employer space. And lastly, I would also like to point out that Veterans Protected Status is only selected for a few, not open to everyone. By changing the Veterans Protected Status for all who served in the National Guard and Reserve, active duty, were discharged in a status other than dishonorable, you can protect the rights of veteran employees across the board. Again, I thank you to everyone on the subcommittee, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Lorraine. The written statements of Dr. Kinch, Sergeant Major Quinn, and Mr. Lorraine will all be entered into the hearing record. Thank you. I now recognize Mr. Prado for 5 minutes.
Good afternoon, Chairman Van Orden, Ranking Member Levin, and distinguished members of the subcommittee. Thank you for the opportunity to testify today. My name is Hernan Luis Prado, the founder and CEO of Workshops for Warriors, headquartered in San Diego, California. I would like to share with you a way to provide those that have served an opportunity to be trained and placed into dignified, lifelong careers, increase our military readiness, and continue serving our nation. What got me here? Have you ever struggled or lost your footing? Do you remember how it felt to suddenly lose a job or even worse, a loved one? I'm a 15-year Navy veteran with combat tours in Afghanistan and Iraq. I knew that on any given day, more than 20 of us were dying from suicide. Why was I losing more friends to suicide than to bombs and bullets overseas? When you're in the military, you're part of America's suit of armor. In this purpose-driven tapestry, each of us knows what's expected and what to expect from others. But when your service ends, you're suddenly ripped out of this fabric and you find yourself alone, adrift, and without a mission. The sudden lack of income, purpose, and identity are overwhelming because you've never been trained or equipped for this new set of challenges. When I came back from my first tour in Iraq, many of my injured Marines convalescing at National Naval Medical Center would come to my house, gather in my garage to tinker with tools and pass the time. Spending time together made me realize how worried these combat veterans were about the scariest thing they had ever encountered, their imminent transition to civilian life. Our numbers grew, and soon my garage became crowded with Marines, welding, machining, and fabricating, the underpinnings of manufacturing. But this was just a diversion. I needed to find a long-term solution for the veteran crisis as well as another looming problem. While we were distracted in not one but two wars, China overtook America and became the world's #1 manufacturing nation. In 2010, China had 56 submarines. By 2030, they'll have 76. We need to build 3 submarines a year just to catch up. We can currently build 1. In short, manufacturing dominance had long been America's economic and military backbone, but now it was no longer our superpower. I began to wonder, could we harness the tremendous human capital that our veterans contain by retraining them to help America regain her economic, manufacturing, and military prowess? What if we gave every veteran the opportunity to rebuild America's manufacturing workforce, to have a dignified life, to be part of the American dream? Sounds great, right? I just didn't know how. In 2006, I was in a mall when I heard a familiar voice call out, "Doc." I turned to see one of my Marines who I'd served with coming towards me. He told me that he had lost both of his legs to an improvised explosive device in Iraq, and I remember his dream of being a Marine Corps lifer, and as he wheeled away from me, I was devastated. Not just by him, but because he represented the lost dreams and aspirations of all of my injured comrades in arms. My knees literally melted, and as I sank to the ground, I had a life-changing epiphany that has driven my life ever since. I grabbed my wife Rachel's arm and said, we're going to sell everything we have and do something. To Rachel's huge credit, she said yes. We sold our home, vehicles, and cashed in our retirement to create an advanced manufacturing training center so that our veterans could be trained for a viable future. We named it Workshops for Warriors. Workshops for Warriors is the only accredited nonprofit in the U.S. dedicated to accelerated and compressed training and placement of veterans and transitioning service members in welding, fabrication, CNC machining, 3D printing, robotics, and computer-aided design careers. Our graduates leave with nationally recognized portable and stackable credentials. But I'm married to a statistician and survey methodologist, so here are the facts. Our school has grown 350 times our original footprint and is about to expand nationally. Workshops has graduated more than 1,125 veterans who have earned more than 12,000 nationally recognized credentials. Our graduates work in every state of our nation for companies like Boeing, SpaceX, and Ford. And since 2011, we have a 94% average placement rate with an average starting salary of $60,000 a year. You could help veterans become America's force multiplier. We know that TAP and SkillBridge can work. We know that retraining veterans works, and it could solve our nation's manufacturing crisis while giving veterans purpose and an opportunity to serve our nation again. So what's the issue? Since 2015, 40% of Workshops for Warriors graduates found out about our program through the Transition Assistance Program. 56% attended by using SkillBridge. For every graduate that used SkillBridge, 3 times that number said their command denied their requests and as a result could not enroll. In January 2023, Deloitte confirmed that America has 803,000 unfilled manufacturing jobs due to lack of skilled labor, and that number is rising to 2.1 million. We should take advantage of this to train our veterans to make America the world's manufacturing and military superpower again. Thank you.
Thanks, Doc. By the way, my title used to be HMCS Van Orden, in case you're wondering. That means you're cleaning the toilets when we get done here, Prado. Mr. Prado's testimony, written statement will now be entered into the record. Hey, before we get started with this questioning here, I'd like to recognize someone who's sitting in the front row there, Mr. Romashot, Staff Sergeant, 1H Medal of Honor recipient. Made me smile. All right, we'll now start our questionings. I'll recognize myself for 5 minutes. My number one legislative priority is to prevent veteran suicide. That's what I'm doing. And I've got a email on my desk. It was written to me by a service member's brother who committed suicide. I spent my first day in Congress calling his widow, his brother, and his father and apologizing for the department or the federal government's inability to schedule a medical appointment. My ranking member Levin's number one legislative priority is preventing veterans' homelessness. And I'm afraid that we catch up on these things too late. What we're talking about here and what you're discussing is an upstream solution. Because once someone has food insecurity or they're living in a bush on a corner, it's so much harder to get that back. And so I want you to know that we're taking this exceptionally seriously. That's why we went to your district in California, Oceanside, home of the Marines. And there's a couple things here I just want to point out. Sergeant Major and Mr. Lorraine. Sergeant Major, you said someone must be in charge. Mr. Lorraine, you echoed that comment, and that's what I started with when we're speaking with our Department of Defense folks here. Someone has to be in charge. We just have to, or things don't work. So we've got SESs, we've got all these people making a ton of money. I don't know how many people are associated with these different programs, how many agencies and phone calls, and no one knows what's going on. And it gives everybody the excuse to get nothing done. And that's got to stop. And I do not agree, Mr. Lorraine, that this should be a Department of Labor issue. I think that this should reside with the Veterans Affairs Committee and with the Veterans Affairs Administration, and this is why. Because every single day we get up, this is all we think about. That's it. And the Department of, ma'am, you came to my office, and I appreciate that greatly, and I don't have heartburn with you at all. What I have heartburn with is the Department of Defense appears to be dragging their feet with this. And lots of times they think that we're shanking people out of the military. That's not the case. My brothers in Naval Special Warfare produced this fantastic transition program, and it clearly demonstrates unequivocally that by providing an off-ramp into the civilian community, you're not making people get out of the military sooner, but what you're doing is preventing them from killing themselves and becoming homeless and drug addicts and alcoholics. And that's what we're here to do. You may not be aware of this, but when you joined the Navy or the Army, and Air Force signed you up for a 30-year career. There's something called the enlisted ladder that lays out very clearly from day one of boot camp to you retire as an E9 Sergeant Major or Command Master Chief. And this has to be integrated into that program. And then it becomes programmatic. And that is something, sir, that we can tie directly to the performance results of these officers. Because until officers start getting fired for this, and senior enlisted people start getting fired for this, and SCSs start getting fired for this, it's not going to change. And we all know, anybody that spent 5 seconds in the military knows that. So I'm going to ask you just one by one here. Ms. Diamond, if you could be queen of the world for a day, who would you put in charge of running the Transition Assistance Program?
I would most likely say the VA, sir.
Mr. Quinn, excuse me, Sergeant Major.
The VA.
Doctor?
The VA.
Mr. Lorraine?
The VA, and sir, I said the ENPP program should move, or sorry, Skill Bridge program should move to labor.
Yeah, well, I understand that.
And not the.
I'm with you. I still disagree, but that's all right.
Okay.
Mr. Prado? I would start with a department, then a person. Why, you looking for a job? Apparently you're busy already, Doc.
Not me, sir.
That's what did you hear that?
Not me. But I know some people that would be very capable.
Okay.
That could help us with that.
Which department do you think they should fall under?
DOD, sir.
Let the record reflect that every single member of this panel thinks that the Veterans Administration should be in charge of the Transition Assistance Program. With that, I yield back. I recognize my ranking member, Mr. Levin, for 5 minutes.
Thank the chairman, and I thank Mr. Luisi Prado for making the journey from San Diego to Washington, D.C. today, a journey I'm quite familiar with every week, but thank you for your expertise as well. Hearing from experts like you is really important. You're on the ground. You're serving veterans every day, so hearing from you and seeing what you're experiencing is really critical to the work of the subcommittee. You urged greater skill bridge participation. How would you suggest we drive more employers to participate in skill bridge?
Ranking member. It's not a question of employers per se. I would say it's a wraparound services required. It's difficult to focus on studying if you're focusing on survival. So the wraparound services are the most impactful way to move a transitioning service member into a viable lifelong career. For example, we had 21 national employers at our last job fair. Every one of our graduates got a job. It's never the employers that are the issue. It's how do we take care of the young men and women that have served, to provide them the wraparound services, the housing. You can't study if you don't know where you're going to put your head at night, if you're starving. We've had to purchase housing, buy a restaurant so you can feed people. We call it FOB San Diego. But you can't focus on what you're trying to do if you don't know where you're going to put your head down. So I'd say the wraparound services are the most important part of that, sir.
Gotcha, I appreciate that very much. The Warrior Training Advancement Course, WARTAC, really good opportunity for transitioning service members and often leads to employment at one of VBA's regional offices. Would you support more programs similar to WARTAC in other federal government agencies for transitioning service members?
I would support any program that actually holds schools and commands accountable with objectively verifiable metrics such as job placement, average starting salaries, nationally recognized credentials, time to hire. We need to have, I believe, objectively measured and tracked metrics so we can track the effectiveness of an organization or their outputs.
Before I turn to others, I just wanted to expand a bit on the chairman's question about which agency should be in charge. I heard the four of you say VA. I heard you say DOD, and I wanted to ask you your rationale.
DOD have people in uniform that can be held accountable. And I think right now the biggest challenge is that the DOD COs don't understand how they can navigate the kind of the friction between unit readiness, a gapped billet, and their responsibility towards helping the service members that are transitioning from their unit get into a lifelong, useful career so they can maintain their communities and rebuild our nation. If you're able to provide them an opportunity by having some higher cover and saying, if you move this person into skill breaks earlier, you will get that billet back. I think that would be the easiest way of making this work forward, because the people that go through our skill breaks program are almost 4 times more likely to make it through the program than someone that is not.
Appreciate that. When you look at the mission statements of the two entities, DOD's, again, is to provide the military forces needed to deter war and ensure our nation's security.
Yes, sir.
VAs to fulfill President Lincoln's promise to care for those who have served our nation's military and for their families, caregivers, and survivors. So same question for you that I had for the last panel. Which do you think more adequately encompasses transition?
I believe
Not a trick question, I promise.
The VA should have overall accountability. There should be a much tighter accountability with the DOD units that we need to mandate and control that they actually send their people to skill breaks. And I agree that the VA should hold on to it, but there has to be much tighter collaboration and accountability between the DOD and the VA.
Got it. I think that's where we're heading with all this. Ms. Diamond, I'll turn to you. You noted that the initial year following transition poses increased risk of suicide for new veterans. Can you speak to the risk factors that contribute to this trend and any protective factors that can alleviate it?
Mr. Ranking Member, absolutely. Thank you for the question. In the short time we have remaining, we need to look at the social determinants of health, so the protective factors. So do they have a roof over their head? Do they have food in their stomach? Can they take care of themselves and their families? Basic needs to be met. Basic needs need to be met. In addition, there's, as Mr. Crane noted, we also need to make sure that service members understand the challenges inherent with transition when we're talking about the loss of social support and the network that you have inherent in the military, and ensuring that we're facilitating connections appropriately to community resources so that they can get those connections. Also, connections to benefits is vital.
I'm out of time, but I would just end by saying that, as the chairman mentioned, his top priority, ending veteran suicide. Mine, ending veteran homelessness, although both I think are incredibly important to us both. Improving transition and the work that you're all doing is vital to both of our objectives. And so this is very high stakes, very important, and we really appreciate the work that you do. And I'll yield back.
Thank you, Ranking Member Levin. I now recognize Mr. Crane for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Appreciate that. Thank you guys for coming today. As I told the last panel, this is a very important topic to me, and I thank you for all the work that you guys are doing on this issue. I want to start with Dr. Kinch. Did I pronounce that correctly? Thank you. All right. Does Student Veterans of America have any recommendation to the education track that could improve how transitioning service members use their GI eligibility and make sure to make the correct choice?
Yes. So thank you so much for that question. We have to start considering the education benefit as soon as someone decides to utilize tuition assistance while in service, because those credits will largely dictate where, how, and when someone can continue to use credits post-service or post-transition using the GI Bill. So if someone doesn't complete a degree using tuition assistance and they've gone somewhere with credits that we will say are largely untransferable, they've then wasted that money using tuition assistance and have to start over using their GI Bill. Student veterans largely go to 4-year public universities, and so understanding the behavior of service members in higher education as well as veterans in higher education, and understanding the transition there would be the first step. We do have a lot of ideas.
Okay. Is there Can somebody, maybe we can start with you, Dr. Kinch, or anybody on this panel, help me understand what other opportunities are available for veterans who have paid into their GI Bill, who might not want to go to a four-year university, higher education, et cetera? Mr. Prado?
Vocational training programs that lead to nationally recognized credentials, I'd say, would be my #1 pick. It's an easy way for people to get average starting salary jobs of $60,000 a year. And most importantly, it rebuilds America's manufacturing capability and readiness. Every single graduating class that I've had since 2008, I ask them the same question. When America goes to war again, ceilings are cut, and we need DoD facilities to rebuild everything that's hard and metal that goes overseas. I want you to report to your closest DoD facility to help rebuild our manufacturing infrastructure. Would anybody here object? In 15 years, I've yet to have a no. They are all people that have a clear purpose, which is why they joined the military. If you provide them compressed training, nationally recognized credentials, they're happy to engage and rebuild our manufacturing infrastructure.
Thank you. Dr. Kinch, real quick, is there any pushback from any of the VSOs up here on giving veterans more of a choice, more options on how to use their GI Bill?
Thank you for that. As far as I know, the options are extremely robust, and a majority of folks who enlist do so for the education benefits on the other side to obtain a college degree. You can use education benefits for a number of opportunities. Like my colleague said, vocational opportunities, you can get your pilot's license. There are a number of things that you can use those benefits for.
Just to put you on the spot, ma'am, can you run me through 5 or 6 of those if you know them off the top of your head?
I would be happy to get that to you after this hearing.
All right. Yeah, the reason I'm pushing and the reason I ask is because I'm big on choice. Like Mr. Prado, when I was getting out, I had the wise idea to start a bottle opening company of all things. And I was working out of my garage with a bunch of other active duty veterans. It's where I found out, sir, that you cannot make a corkscrew in the United States of America. It blew me away. All of them are made overseas. So I love what you're doing as far as trying to bring back manufacturing into this country. Unfortunately, I don't think it's a workforce issue. I think it's a politician issue and shipping a lot of our manufacturing overseas, which is very, very disheartening. But I do want to see veterans have the opportunity, when possible, to use their GI Bill, which they paid into, if they decide that a 4-year higher education tract isn't what they're looking for. Mr. Lauren, go ahead, ma'am.
I just wanted to clarify, the current iteration as well as the post 9/11 GI Bill are not paid into.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay.
Just really, I brought up apprenticeships. Apprenticeships are opportunities. They're a GI Bill-like program. The problem is that the housing stipend decreases over time, makes it unattractive.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
You're welcome, Mr. Crane. I appreciate it greatly. And thank you, Ranking Member Levin, for correcting that. Apparently I'm a little older than you, Doc, because I swear I heard VA. Son of a... Hey, but we'll sit down and talk about this, and I think you'll see the clarity of thought there.
Yes, sir.
I want to thank you all. I want to thank you all for coming. I really do. This is an incredibly important topic, and you guys are doing the work, and gals, you are doing the work, and I'm just so proud of you. We owe each other a debt that does not get repaid. It simply does not. And if we can, through our work up here, with your work out there, and with you guys in the back, and I was yelling at you, sir, from the DOD, if all of us can get together and prevent one veteran from committing suicide, and preventing one veteran from winding up sleeping in a bush, then all of this is worth it. So I want to thank you very much. I want you also to understand that we're not done with TAP. We will be working, bless you, we will be working diligently to make sure that we can get the best product to the most amount of people, to our brothers and sisters that have served this country. So again, thank you very much. And with that, Ranking Member Levin, do you have any closing comments?
I just want to thank everybody for the work they do each and every day. That's often overlooked. It's incredibly important, and we're grateful for it. And I thank the chairman for his outstanding hearing today.
All right. I ask unanimous consent that all members may have 5 legislative days to revise and extend their remarks and include extraneous materials. Without objection, so ordered. This hearing stands adjourned.